All right, so this lesson is going to be on solving equations by factoring. So we can call it 4.2 if you want to. All right, so factoring, like what we've been doing for like a week, is the second step of this. So if you still don't know how to do that, then hopefully today you can pay attention and practice it and finally get it down. You are going to want your factors pairs charts if you guys want to grab that. It's going to be helpful just like it has been from the beginning. Okay, so the first step to solve by factoring is to move all your terms to one side so the equation is equal to 0. So you can't solve by factoring if you don't do that. That step has to be done. Do we need to do that on any of these ones on the front? No, they all equal 0. So on the front, we can kind of forget about that first step. And then step 2 is going to be to factor. All right, so if you guys remember from Thursday, I put it on the board, all the different ways to factor. There was greatest common factor, difference of squares, factor normally, and slide, divide, bottoms up. So this number 2, which one of those do you think it is? If there's two terms, it cannot be factor normally or slide, divide, bottoms up. So it's either difference of squares or greatest common factor. What do y'all think? Greatest common factor, good. And what is the greatest common factor on this? 4. And there's one other thing they have in common. Well, besides 2. What else do they both have? A 4 and an X. They both have a 4 and an X. That's your GCF. That's what we're going to factor out. So to factor out a greatest common factor, you put it outside of a set of parentheses. And then you're going to divide each of those by 4x. So 4, just 4, divided by 4 is going to be 1. You can write it or not write it. That's up to you. What about x squared divided by x? 0. It's not 0. It's just x. So basically, it's you take the exponents and you subtract them. So it's 2 minus 1 is x to the first, which you don't really need to write. All right, and then we need to factor 4x out of 8x. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. And then what happens to the x's? It completely cancels out. Okay, so that was the same thing we did all last week and part of the week before. The new part is now we are going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So these are two things multiplied that get 0. So it's 4x times x minus 2 is 0. So if you're multiplying and you get 0, how does that happen? Like how do you multiply to get 0? Something has to be times 0. So every time you multiply and get 0, one of those things is 0. All right, so what we're going to do is set each of those equal to 0, because if you multiply and get 0, at least one of them is 0. So set those both equal to 0. And then this should leave you with either a one-step or two-step equation to solve for x. So the one on the left, how do you solve it for x? This one, how do you solve it for x? Divide by 4. So what is 0 divided by 4? 0. So that's one answer. All right, what about the other one? What do we need to do? Add 2. Since it's minus 2, you add 2. And that's the other answer. So a lot of these equations are going to have 2 answers. Some may only have 1, but most of them are going to have 2. All right, so that's what you do whenever it's a GCF. The next one is going to be different. So 9x squared and 25 do not have a common factor, but there's only 2 terms. So are they both perfect squares? Is 9x squared a perfect square? Is 25 a perfect square? Yes. So this is the difference of squares. All right, when you factor using difference of squares, you don't really have to think that much about it. You just do your 2 parentheses and you find each square root, which is going to be 3x and 5. And you do one with a plus and one with a minus. Nope, because you can do minus and then plus. That's fine, yeah. Okay, that's how you factor it. Then you're going to set each of those equal to 0. So we have 3x plus 5 equals 0 and 3x minus 5 equals 0. Now, because there's multiplication and addition and multiplication and subtraction, this is going to be a 2-step equation. So we're going to move the 5 over first by subtracting it. So if it's plus 5, you subtract the 5 and then divide by 3. Now, these probably won't reduce, so just leave them as negative 5 over 3. All right, and then for the other one, it's basically the same steps, except since this is a minus 5, your first step is going to be to add 5. And then divide by 3. All right, so this is another one that has 2 answers. All right, let's look at number 6. So number 6, is there a common factor on this one? Yes, 2. So let's start off and factor out a 2. We're going to divide each of those by 2. All right, then on this one with 3 terms, where there's not a number in front of x squared, we're going to factor normally. All right, so that 2 is just going to hang out on the outside. And then for x squared, it's going to be x and x. And we're going to multiply to get negative 12. And then we're going to add, or pretty much subtract, to get negative 1. So I know 100% of the time, if you multiply and get a negative, it's a positive and a negative. All right, so we want to go to our factors pairs chart and look in the 12 box. I got it somewhere. It's going to take a minute. All right. And since the signs are different, we want to find which pairs in that 12 box subtract to give you negative 1. What do y'all think? 3 and 4. Yep. Where are you? There we go. All right, which one needs to be negative? Because we want to get negative 1. The 3 or the 4? The 4, good. The bigger one needs to be negative. All right. Then we're going to set our factors equal to 0. Do you guys think we need to set 2 equal to 0? Like, can 2 equal 0? Ever? No. 2 will never equal 0. So anything that has an x, you set it equal to 0. And then solve for x by either adding or subtracting. So on the one on the left, you're going to subtract 3. And the one on the right, you're going to add 4. Right? And then this last one is the last type of factoring that we haven't done yet. So slide divide bottoms up. And I know that that is the case because Jonathan can't see. Do you want to move up to the front? Are you okay? Okay. I know it's the case because there's not a common factor and there's a number in front of x squared. All right, so this one's going to be slide, divide, bottoms up. Now on your quiz, a lot of people got this almost right. Like they would get to a certain point on it and then they wouldn't really know what to do. So hopefully today we can get everybody being able to do all the steps. So the first step is to slide that 6 over with the 4 by multiplying them together. So it gets moved away from the x squared. And when I multiply it by -4, I'm going to get -24. Then you're going to factor it normally just for one step. We use the same rules we just did, but we have more to do after that. So I know it's x and x. I know if I multiply and get a negative that my signs are different. One's a plus and one's a minus. So I'm going to scroll down to my 24 box and I want to find numbers that are going to subtract to give me that 5. There we go. What do y'all think? To subtract and get 5 in this box. Yes. There we go. All right, this time we want to get a positive 5. So the bigger number is positive, the smaller number is negative, but we are not done with the factoring part. There's still a couple more steps. The next step is to divide, and you're going to divide by this number that we slid. So we're going to divide by 6. We're going to reduce both of those fractions. Then we're going to do bottoms up. Where the 3 is going to come up and the 2 is going to come up. All right, and now we've done the factoring step. Okay, and now we're ready to set each of these equal to 0. Now the ones where you do slide, divide, bottoms up, they may go outside of the box. Depends on how big you write. Okay, so both of these are going to have 2 steps, an addition or subtraction step. So on this one, since this is a +4, I'm going to subtract 4. And then a division step. And again, these fractions probably are not going to reduce, so just leave them like they are. There's no reason to do like a decimal or anything. All right, so this one is going to have an addition or subtraction step. So it's -1, so it's going to be adding 1. And then a division step. So we have two answers again. All right. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to do the back. On the back, I'm not going to spend as much time talking about the factoring part because we just did every type of factoring together. So the thing that we're going to have to kind of focus on the back is the getting everything on one side part. So if you look at these problems, none of them are equal to 0. So all the ones on the back, we're going to need to start off by getting everything on one side. So that's step 1, but none of the ones we've done so far, we've had to do step 1. All right. So when we're moving terms across the equal sign, you basically just move it to the other side with the opposite sign. So we have a positive x squared. So we're going to basically subtract it from itself and then subtract it from its like term. So subtract it from the other x squared. So if you have 7x squareds and you subtract 1 from them, how many do you have? 6x squareds. And then the 8x doesn't change because we didn't have any like terms for the 8x. And then x squared minus x squared, what's that? 0. That's what you wanted. That's what you needed. So you can't start factoring until it equals 0. Okay. And then for this one, it's just like the first one we did. This one is going to be a GCF. And the GCF is going to be 2x. So you guys factor a 2x out on your own, please. All right, so that should leave you with 3x plus 4. And then we're going to set each of those equal to 0. So 2x equals 0. 3x plus 4 equals 0. So we're going to get x is 0. And x is negative 4/3. Okay. So these notes are pretty repetitive. So number 12 is a lot like the second one that we did together today. But to start off, we need to get everything on one side. So I'm going to move the x squared has a minus in front of it. So to move it over, I'm going to add it. So I'm going to add it to itself. And then I'm going to add it to its like term. And then the 81, I'm going to subtract it because it's positive. And then when I subtract it from the other side, there isn't a like term. So I'm just going to kind of write it over to the side. So 3x squared plus 1x squared is going to be 4x squared. And then the 81 is subtracted just from nothing. And that should equal 0.
Couldn't you just subtract?
Yes, you could subtract the 3x squared if you wanted to. So that would have been 81 minus 4x squared is equal to 0. Yes. You'll get the exact same answers either way. It doesn't matter what side you move it on. All right, and then this one is difference of squares. So just like we did on the other side, you find each square root and you put one with a plus and you put one with a minus. All right, and then we set each factor equal to 0. And solve for x by adding or subtracting and then dividing. All right, let's look at the next one. So let's go ahead and get everything on one side by subtracting x from itself, so it goes away, and subtracting it from the like terms. And then same thing with the 4, subtracting it from itself and subtracting it from like terms. Okay. This one has 3 terms. There's not a number in front of x squared, so this is one of the ones where we're going to factor normally. So we'll have our 2 parentheses. To get x squared, it's x and x. This tells you your signs are the same because we multiply to get a positive. They have to be the same sign. Add to get a positive. In that case, they have to be both positives. Okay. And then you can look at the pairs chart for 25. There's only 2 pairs of numbers that multiply to give you 25. Which 2 add to give you 10? 5 and 5. Fairly obvious. So it has to be 5 and 5. Now, do you guys think we need to set both of these equal to 0? If they're the same? You can, but you don't have to. You're going to get the same number twice. So if you get the same factor twice, you only have to solve it once because there's just no reason. So this is one of the ones where there's only one answer. So it happens sometimes. Okay, so your assignment is to do the odds. I'm going to go ahead and do 16 and 18 for people that need to see it. If you feel good, like you're good at factoring and you're good at moving everything on one side, you can go ahead and start doing the odds. It's fine. It's up to you. But I'm going to finish it up just for people who still feel like they need a little extra help. Because the way this worksheet works, like number 13, you're going to do a lot like you did number 14. And then number 11, you're going to do a lot like you did number 12. So if you want to see an example for every block, then keep writing. If you feel fine, then you can start working on your homework. Okay, so this one, I'm going to go ahead and get everything on one side by subtracting 2 from itself and its like term, adding 3x to itself and like term. So because the 3x was negative, I need to do the addition. All right, so this ends up being 4x plus 4x squared, plus 44x plus 96 equals 0. Okay. Now this one does have a greatest common factor of 4. So I'm going to factor that out and divide each of these by it. And then I can factor normally. So I know that if I multiplied and got a positive, they're the same signs, and they have to be whatever this sign is. So 2 positives. And if I look down to see what multiplies to give me 24 and adds to give me 11, it's going to have to be 8 and 3. All right, so we're multiplying to get 24, adding to get 11. That's going to be 8 and 3. Right. And then when I'm setting each factor equal to 0, if your factor doesn't have an x, it cannot equal 0. So we don't use the 4. We're just going to use x plus 8 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. And to solve each of those, you're just going to subtract. So we're going to get negative 8. And we're going to get negative 3. Okay. And then the very last one, we're going to get everything on one side by subtracting x from itself and from the like terms, and adding 9 to itself and to nothing on the other side. Okay, this one has 3 terms. It doesn't have a common factor, and there's a number in the front. So we're going to do slide, divide, bottoms up. So we'll start off by sliding the 4 over with the 9. Then we're going to take one step to factor normally. I know if I multiply and get a positive, I'm multiplying the same signs, and they're going to be whatever this one is. So 2 minuses, multiply to give a positive, and add to give a negative. And we want to multiply to get 36 and add to get 12. So it's going to be 6 and 6. You're not done. So we have to divide. I know it's very tempting to think that, oh, okay, I'm done, but you're not. So we have to do the divide step, simplify the fractions, and then do bottoms up. And because these are the same factor, we don't have to do it twice. We can just have one. Oh, I'm out of room. One where we have 2x minus 3 equals 0, where we'll just move that 3 over and then divide by the 2. So x is 3 halves. So that one only has one solution. Okay, so your assignment is to do the odds. And we're going to keep working on this tomorrow too.